Good morning. Welcome in. We are going to continue our discussion on Egypt today. We're going to kind of pick up where we left off. We talked about the importance of hieroglyphics. We talked about the importance of papyrus, and we talked about the Egyptian social structure. Well, we're going to go right to the top of the Egyptian social structure with the pharaoh. Okay, so let's talk about pharaohs and their significance and their role within Egyptian society. Okay, so the king or the ruler of Egypt was called a pharaoh. All right, the pharaoh was seen as a god on earth. Okay, everyone within the Egyptian community worked for the pharaoh. Okay, when the pharaoh passed away, the pharaoh was mummified and buried in a beautiful chamber along with all of his or her belongings. Okay, like all civilizations, Egyptians had a need for laws. The pharaoh was the supreme judge of what was right and wrong under the law. So they were essentially the judge, jury, and the executioner. They had all those responsibilities. Okay, so all right, the pharaoh was in charge of three main things. The first thing is the economy. Okay, the pharaoh collected taxes, and it would collect a portion of crops from each Egyptian civilian. Trade was the way in which the Egyptians were able to pay for these services. Okay, government, again, the pharaoh would appoint powerful local leaders called governors. All right, and then the governors would collect taxes, and they served as local judges. Okay, they would make sure that the local floodwaters were also shared equally. Okay, and then religion. So understand this: the Egyptian people believed that the pharaoh was the child of the sun god Ra. Okay, the sun god gave life to Egypt, and the pharaoh was basically there to be worshipped, and they would come from all over Egypt to see the pharaoh, to pray and worship and devote themselves to the pharaoh. Okay, the pharaohs that you may have heard of. King Menes, he united the upper and lower parts of Egypt. You also may have heard of King Tut. Much of what we know about King Tut today is derived from his tomb, which was discovered in 1922. So understand this: King Tut was 9 years old when he was chosen to replace Akhenaten. Okay, as he replaced Akhenaten, the priests of Egypt essentially they guided King Tut as he was very young as a leader at 9 years old. He died only at the age of 19. All right, his tomb was discovered in 1922. The tomb contained every aspect of King Tutankhamun's life, and what we know from these Egyptian tombs is that the belief in the afterlife was paramount. Okay, you would start seeing riches, food, other worldly provisions, basically telling us that they were devoting themselves to the next life or the afterlife. Okay, and it was incredibly important within Egyptian culture for them to be preserved to get into that afterlife, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, so again, some famous Egyptian pharaohs. You have uh, King Thutmose III. You also have Hatshepsut. She was one of the few female pharaohs. All right, and she expanded trade more than any other pharaoh. She would dress and behave like a man to earn the respect of all Egyptians. So she put herself in power, and she was feared by many. Okay, you've got Ramses II, and you've also got the pharaoh who built the Great Pyramids, and that was King Khufu. Okay, these pyramids are located in Giza. All right. Okay, so let's talk about religion. And understand this: religion was incredibly important for the Egyptian people. The Egyptians believed in many gods. So what do we call that? We call that polytheistic. Multiple gods. Poly is that root word meaning many. So you have polytheism rampant throughout Egypt. The Egyptians prayed to different gods who controlled different things, controlled different aspects of nature and different aspects of their lives. They would build these great temples and pyramids and shrines to honor their gods. The Egyptians did believe in an afterlife. Okay, you will notice what's interesting about most of the Egyptian gods is they are part human and part animal. Okay, I'm going to highlight 4 of these main gods. So today I'm actually working off my cell phone because I forgot my second laptop, so that's why I'm looking down with my notes. So you have first King Anubis, and Anubis is going to be the god of preserving the dead. You have him in kind of a dog-like figure. You've got Horus, who looks like an eagle or a hawk, and Horus is god of the sky. You also have Osiris, and this is god of the dead in the underworld. Okay, so you have Osiris that is wrapped with snakes, or what they would call the asp. And then you also have Ra, perhaps the most famous of the Egyptian gods. And Ra was god of the sun. Okay? Okay. Now, let's talk about mummification. All right? Egyptians believe that when people die, they move on to another world. All right? Since people needed their body into the afterlife, they would need to be preserved. All right, the process of mummification developed, and it's a very interesting, grotesque process, which we'll get into right now. Okay, first they're going to remove the organs, all right, from the body. So the main organs are going to be removed from the body, and they're going to be put in canopic jars. So they'd be put in jars. Then they would take the brain out through the nose. They would then pack the body with natron, all right, which is a salt mixture that would remove all of the moisture from the body. Okay, after several weeks, they would apply oil. They would wrap the body in bandages and place the body in a sarcophagus. Okay, so again, sarcophagus is very elaborate. You think of a coffin, but a sarcophagus would have all the details of that particular pharaoh or that particular person that was being buried. They would put a decorative mask on the body. The body would be put into a chamber, all right, with all the things that would be needed for the afterlife. So food, riches, gold, expenditures. You'd have all of these things that would be guaranteed to them once they woke up in the afterlife. So the mummification process, fascinating, very neat. Even today, we are starting to still find mummies throughout modern Egypt. So again, we look at it as a really a neat process, but that was part of their religious beliefs and part of their religious structure. Okay. Lastly, I want to kind of talk about the ancient Egypt timeline and kind of the rise and the fall of Egypt. All right. Understand this: around 6000 BC, Egypt was mostly a grassland along the Nile. You'd have nomads who are searching for food that are going to settle into the area. The early dynasty is going to be led by King Menes, and he's going to unite the upper and lower parts of Egypt, and he establishes a capital at Memphis. So Memphis, that we may be familiar with in Tennessee, but Memphis is actually an Egyptian term. The Old Kingdom is going to reflect the age of the pyramids. This is where we have our first man-made mummies as well. Okay, the Middle Kingdom is going to be the rise of the middle class, and this is where trade becomes the centerpiece of the economy. Next, you've got the New Kingdom, and this is where major trading expeditions are going to occur. You've got Akhenaten and Queen Hatshepsut, who are going to lead the way in trade and commerce. The Ptolemaic dynasty is where we're going to see Alexander the Great conquer Egypt, and this is where we're seeing Cleopatra as the last pharaoh of Egypt. We're going to talk more about Cleopatra when we get into Rome, but her affairs with the Romans are going to lead to the downfall of Egypt. Romans are going to take control of Egypt, and essentially Egypt never retains that greatness that it once had as a civilization. So once Rome essentially conquers Egypt, Egypt kind of falls out of power, and it does not have the prestige and the honor that it once had. Okay? So just kind of a quick timeline to give you an idea of the scope of ancient Egypt. All right? But that's it. That's our discussion on Egypt. Again, a two-parter. There's a journal log that's going to coincide with today's discussion. Make sure you take a look at the notes. And then we'll have our final discussion on the Indus River Valley civilization that will wrap up civilization. We'll start working on review toward the end of next week. All right? Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Have a great weekend.